everyone, it's Penny with Our Crazy Adventures in Autism Land. In this workshop, we're going to talk about how to pick developmentally appropriate curriculum for your child with autism. Let's get started. Before we can get started on choosing the developmentally appropriate curriculum for our child, we need to know the difference between chronological and developmental age and how to find your child's developmental age. So chronological age is the actual physical age of your child. So if your child's 5 years old now, then that's their chronological age. Pretty easy. It doesn't take into account social emotional development, and it's not useful for educational purposes. Some people would disagree with that and say you need to know what level your child should be on so that you can know if they're behind or if they're ahead or whatever. In homeschool, you don't need to know that level. You just work at your child's pace. So it's not useful for homeschool educational purposes, their chronological age. Now, their developmental age is pretty useful. It's the age where your child can successfully, I couldn't say that word for a minute there, complete 80% of skills on a developmental checklist. So if you got a developmental checklist and you have a 5-year-old and you mark off all the skills and he can complete 80% of skills that a 3-year-old could complete, then he would be developmentally 3 years old. And it's not uncommon for children with autism to have some developmental gaps and not be able to not to meet their chronological age, if that makes sense. So don't be super worried when that happens. It can be significantly lower than their chronological age. So they could be 5, but really be more like an 18-month developmental age. Or they could be 15 and really be more like 8 or 9. So there can be like a big gap between their chronological age and their developmental age. It isn't necessarily their maturity level. This is especially true in girls. So they could be super mature for their age, or they could be super immature for their age, and you think, oh, they must be younger or they must be older. That's not a useful measurement of their developmental age. So for homeschool purposes, we usually just focus on the developmental age and where they're at. Progress comes faster and with far less stress when you know the difference between the two ages and use it to your advantage. Why is that? Because if you put your child in where they are chronologically and they're not there yet developmentally, they will not be successful and therefore they will not feel competent. When you work at your child's level and at his pace, then your child feels more competent and he also trusts you more, so that he's willing to go a little bit out of his comfort zone than he usually is when he's just thrown into the mix and expected to know how to do it. So how do you know your child has a different developmental age? Well, is your child advanced in some areas or at age level in some areas, but delayed in others? So, for example, when we had Madison, my daughter, Logan was about 5. He was 5, 4.5, but he was developmentally around 18 months. We discovered that as Madison got older because he liked to do the things she liked to do, and he was really competent in them, and he really had fun. But when we started to make him do pre-K or kindergarten work, because that was his chronological age, he was not having fun. He was not competent in it. He did not do well. So we discovered that Logan's developmental age was about 4 years behind his actual chronological age. So the higher level skills that we were asking of him in kindergarten and in pre-K couldn't be achieved because we weren't filling in the developmental gaps. We weren't filling in the missing pieces because he was still developmentally about 18 months to a year, 2 years old. So mirror neurons in his brain needed to fire in those undeveloped parts to make new pathways in order for him to fill in those gaps and be able to complete kindergarten, pre-K, first grade work. So by bringing him back to even though it was super hard and it was super stressful and it was so, I don't even know the word for it. It was so depressing to bring him back to that level with Madison and just sort of work with them together like they were twins, even though Logan was significantly bigger than her. But to work with them together at that level, we filled in those gaps and then he made huge jumps. How can you determine their developmental age? So we've talked about developmental age, and I want you to know their developmental age, I should show you how to find the developmental age. A couple of things you can do. You can just get down on the floor and play with them. Gravitate toward the toys that they like. You can sort of see if they like preschool toys, and obviously they're at a preschool level. If they're 10 years old and still watching Dora the Explorer, then obviously they're at preschool, kindergarten level. I think Dora is preschool level. But you would just get down and play with them. See what they like to play with. See what they like to do. Just get on the floor and play with them. You could also have them have a little play date over at your house, or when you go, if you happen to go to church and your child plays in the nursery or anything like that, maybe just have some cousins come over. But have them play with other children of various ages. You could do this at a playground. I don't recommend doing this at a playground for many reasons. One of them being safety reasons. You can't look at the children he's gravitating toward and keep him safe at the same time. Plus, playgrounds have loud noises, they have many things to do and see, and it's sensory overwhelming for a child, especially one with autism, and with sensory issues. So I don't recommend doing this at the park because you may or may not get good feedback there. So have them play at an indoor playground maybe that just has a couple kids, or have some cousins come over or something like that in order to do that. You could simply ask others who interact with your child regularly. If you have if grandma babysits him every Friday, you could ask her what she thinks. You could be careful with that though, because grandma tends to think that your child is smarter, better. I mean, she's grandma than he's doing, and you really want an honest opinion here, no matter how hard it is. Grandma may not be the person to ask, but if auntie comes over regularly, or if he interacts with the neighbor on something, you're looking for people that interact with your child enough to be able to answer the question. So that's why you could do that. The CDC.gov has a great developmental checklist. I think it goes up to age 5. It just tells you at this age your child should be able to drink from a cup, or should be able to hold his own fork, or it's all just developmental milestones that you could look at and check off. Remember, we are trying to find the age that they can do 80% of those. If you've had an IEP meeting because you've come out of public school, you know the 80% rule. In order to be considered successful, your child needs to be able to do it 80% of the time. This is where you may want to have someone else also fill out the checklist, because it will get a little demoralizing as you realize. We realized, for example, Logan was 4.5, that he couldn't drink from a cup. He still only needed a sippy cup, or he needed a cup with a straw, but he couldn't drink from a cup without a lid. And that's not developmentally appropriate for a pre-K or kindergartner. So it can be a little demoralizing to realize that. But we're trying to find an answer for your child. So that can sort of give you a little incentive to do it correctly. You could also use homeschool placement test if you have an older child. Teaching Textbooks has a placement test. Right Shop has a placement test. All of the major curriculum providers usually have some sort of placement test and will tell you about the age range that you're looking for. Realize that your child may be several different levels. He may be really great in math, but terrible in writing. He may be really great in history, but terrible at Spanish. So the homeschool placement test is good if you're looking for where they're going. We're looking for their developmental age. It will give you a little bit of information so you sort of know what you're looking for. So there are a couple other things to consider when you're looking at their developmental age. So their academic cognitive levels, where do they rank in those areas as opposed to their same age peers? This is the part where you would need to know where a child who's 10 years old should be. Like, they should be in 4th grade and they should be doing this and that. So where does your child rank when compared to their age? The social emotional level is, how is their communication, play skills, social skills compared to same age peers. Remember though that children in public school are taught to socialize with just their peers, and they don't sort of socialize with many different ages. So I would do the social skills based on a same age peer who's also homeschooled rather than a same age peer who is in public school, because you're going to get two totally different situations there. You're going to get two totally different feedbacks. But you know how their communication skills are. Can they talk as well as a 10-year-old? Or can they play with other 10-year-olds? Or can they say hi? And a 10-year-old could go into the store with you and pay for his own stuff, things like that. So you need to know that. Again, don't be depressed about it, but make sure you're comparing apples to oranges, that you're comparing your homeschool kid to another homeschool kid and not to a public school kid, because you're going to, like I said, get completely different feedbacks. How is their impulsivity and behavior? Can they regulate their own body and control their impulses? A lot of kids cannot control their impulses, especially kids with autism or with ADHD. That's one of the signs, is that they're very impulsive. So if your 10-year-old is still reaching out and poking someone as they walk by, that's not age appropriate. So he's a little bit, you'd expect that out of your 5-year-old. So now sort of what, it's just, if you've already done the other things, then you're on the right track, and he's probably 5 years old. So these are some things to consider, but you already know by the time you get to this part what you're looking at. Okay, so now that you know your child's developmental age, you can tailor their curriculum to their age. Now, the reason why you want to do this is because we spoke earlier, they're going to respond better and feel more competent if you are working at their developmental age. To tailor the curriculum, though, I want to be sure you know this, that you will most likely not be able to use an out-of-the-box curriculum. You most likely will not be able to order Bookshark or Sunlight or Master Books complete curriculum and use it as it's intended, because your child is going to have many different levels depending on their strengths and weaknesses. Knowing that early also helps you to know that you don't waste money on an out-of-the-box curriculum that your child's not going to be able to use. Even Timberdoodle, which is very hands-on, very, very sensory involved and is made for special needs children, even that I would hesitate to buy a completely out-of-the-box curriculum from them and not sort of piece it together, because you're still going to have various ages and various developmental skills and all that. So you're really wasting your money if you buy a completely out of the box curriculum, because there's going to be portions of it that you simply cannot use. You can wait for it to get there, or you can, for them to get there, or you can just sell it. Of course, those are options. And you may get stuff that, if you get the right developmental age, is too young for your child. Anyway, all that to say that I have never had success with a complete out-of-the-box curriculum that came to me that Logan could use for every single subject. I always had to piece it all together. It was a very costly mistake for me, so I wanted to share that with you. You need to take the time to find every single level that your child is at. You need to figure out where he's at in math. You need to figure out where he's at in reading. You need to figure out where he's at in writing. Most likely writing is going to be the one that he is significantly, I don't want to say behind, because that's not the word, but he has some significant challenges for that. It's hard for our kids to get their thoughts from their brain out onto the paper. And that's because they don't have the executive functioning skills yet to do that. Here's where we go back to their developmental age. By going back and filling in those gaps, we help them sort of make the stepping stones to the higher level executive functioning skills, like putting our thoughts in order, following multi-step directions, being able to recall something that happened earlier. All of that to say that by finding their developmental age, you make them successful in that. So each particular subject is probably going to have a different level. You also sometimes have Now that we know their developmental age, we can pick developmentally appropriate curriculum for them. I will tell you that you will have to tailor their curriculum. You will most likely not be able to use an out-of-the-box curriculum. For example, you won't be able to order a Sunlight level or a Bookshark level or a Master Books or even a Becca. All of those, they say grade 2 or grade 5, and everything you need is in that box. Even Timberdoodle, you will have difficulty doing that. Because your child will be at a different level for each subject because of their developmental age. So we also have comorbidities that exist, like dyslexia or apraxia of speech, things like that, that will affect what level our child is on. I have never found success buying an out-of-the-box curriculum and being able to use all of it for our learning purposes. Some of it has either been too young, like in math, or some of it has been too advanced, like in writing. So for writing, for example, language arts, our children usually have difficulty. That's the most challenging subject you will probably teach because it's hard to get their thoughts from their brain to the paper. They don't have the higher level executive functioning skills to do that. That's why you go back to their developmental age and you fill in the gaps so that they can make those stepping stones to those higher level executive functioning skills that they need to write, like organizing their thoughts in their brain or recalling a past event or being able to follow multi-step directions, things like that. You could buy an out-of-the-box curriculum and just sell the pieces you don't need or save them for when they can use them, whatever. I'm here to tell you that you will not be able to use the out-of-box curriculum as it's intended for that particular year. That is why here in Autism Land, we do not buy out-of-the-box curriculums. We piece it together and buy from many different homeschool curriculum publishers. That to say, you need to find every single level your child is at for every single subject. This is where the homeschool placement test can sort of come in because then it'll be easy. Like on teaching textbooks, they take a test and that they tell you exactly what level your child should be in. Write Shop, which is a language arts curriculum or writing curriculum, does the same thing. You answer some questions. It can be a little harder if they're learning to read and things like that, or if they have communication issues. I will say that sometimes when they're much younger, you are better off attending to the therapy needs that are inhibiting them from progress, progress, progressing before you start academics. They can't learn if they don't have the right sensory diet, if they don't, if they're not ready to they just have therapy needs that have to be they very impulsive, things like that. So sometimes you have to attend to therapy needs over academics. That's not a bad thing. If your child has a communication disorder or is a struggling reader, I would highly suggest that you just read out loud to them, read audiobooks to them, things like that. You don't necessarily need a reading curriculum for them at that developmental age. And then as they progress, through the ages, they will get there. But you have to take the time to find every developmental level for every single subject you're going to teach. Remember that because of their underdeveloped parts of their brain, creative things will be hard for them. So you would pick a younger art or younger music than you would for math, or if they're a really strong reader. So it behooves you to know the answers to that, to really take a lot of time and effort to find not only their overall developmental age, but their developmental age for every subject. This will pay big dividends. You will put in a lot of hard work to figure this out. You will put in a lot of hard work to go with the right publisher that you need or homeschool curriculum or all of that. But it will pay huge dividends. Let me tell you why. When you work at your child's developmental level and at his pace, I said this earlier. He's very successful. He feels competent. He wants to learn from you. He understands the master-apprentice relationship, which just means that he understands that you have something to teach him and that he wants to learn it from you. That's the master-apprentice relationship. You are the master, he is the apprentice. But we have to teach our kids that we have stuff they want to know. And so when you work at his pace and at his level, he starts to realize that, and then he's ready to do other things. You'll find that therapy goes better, your family life goes better, things like that, because he knows that you have stuff to teach him. So by putting in all the hard work and by finding out the overall developmental age, you will work with him instead of at him or for him. And he will understand that. Reminding you that it's a marathon, not a sprint. As an older mom, I can tell you that. As a young mom, I did not know that. So you have to remember that even slow progress is still progress. But sometimes you have to stop and say, this isn't working because we're too far ahead and we just need to go back and work at his developmental age. You will never go wrong working at his developmental age and at his pace. I hope that here at the end of this workshop that you know how to find your child's developmental age, which is crucially important, the overall developmental age. I hope you know how to apply that to curriculum so that you will be able to move at your child's pace and at his level. If your child's developmental age is 5 years old, then you of course would be looking at kindergarten stuff. Can he do this? Can he do that? If your child's developmental age is 10, then you would be, okay, he's probably around 4th grade, so let's see if he can do all of this. It is tedious and hard work to find all the levels, but as I said in the previous slide, you will not regret it. It will really, knowing their overall developmental age will not only help you in homeschool, but it will also help you in your family life because you'll be able to react to your child based on his developmental age. It's not as annoying when your child pokes people as they walk by if you realize that he's 5 years old and that 5-year-olds do that. So then you would respond and correct him according to what you would do to a 5-year-old. It gives you a little bit more patience for nothing else. It helped me when I learned to react to Logan based on his developmental age to know that he was not doing it on purpose. He didn't necessarily need correction every time, but that for his developmental age, that was age appropriate. And so I felt a little better and I could react and respond to him with grace at that point. It will transform your family. I'm serious. If you have any questions, find me at any of these places or come follow me at these places and you can see what I do with Logan and I openly share my family, probably a little too much for my family's enjoyment, but I'm always here to help you. So please reach out if you have any questions about how to find developmentally appropriate curriculum or if you can't figure out your child's developmental age, anything like that, anything homeschooling autism, I'd be happy to talk to you about. Thanks.